I want to move on now to a related topic, one that is very important for psychologists, but also for you to apply in your life. And that is the importance of the situation we create or that is created for us. In many ways, psychology, social psychology for sure, was spawned by a series of research that was done on the power of the situation, but it was mostly the negative power of the situation. So those of you who have taken Psych 1, those of you who haven't, may have heard of the Asch conformity experiments, where people conformed to the idea of the group. Or many of you probably heard of Milgram's obedience to authority experiment. If you haven't heard about it, I'm not going to go into depth here. Read about it. Just Google it. Some of the most important and fascinating studies in the field of psychology, where a person off the street was told by an experimenter to shock another person, even to the point where the other person is screaming to stop. And because the experimenter was saying the experiment must go on, and very often had a white cloak, like a doctor's or an experimenter's cloak around them, because they said the experiment must go on, very often most people, Americans, went on and shocked that person, even to the point of the other person whimpering and begging to be let out, simply because of the word, the experiment must go on. The power of the situation, obedience to authority. This was done in order to show how something like the Holocaust could only happen in Germany, how people there are more likely to be obedient to authority. And what they found globally, worldwide, people have the tendency to be obedient to authority, whether it was in the United States or in Germany. Around the world, same replicated. The power of the situation. Philip Zimbardo's prison experiment. This was done at Stanford, where what they did was take in, again, read about it if you haven't, I'm not going to go into depth here, where they took people off the street and have them play the role of either the prison warden, the guard, or the prisoner. And the experiment was supposed to go on for 2 weeks to show what entering a role does. And what they found was that after a week, the experiment had to be stopped because the wardens, people off the street, randomly divided, were becoming so oppressive, they humiliated the prisoners who got into their position of being humiliated, just like prisoners often feel. This explains Abu Ghraib, current phenomenon, what happened in the Iraqi prisons, of how people off the street entered the role. They entered the role so much that Zimbardo had to stop the experiment after 1 week. Go on YouTube and watch the video about this mind-boggling stuff. So this is all important, good to know, important to know, but not enough. Because if the situation is so powerful, why just the emphasis on the negative? Why not think about creating positive situations that will help us lead happier, more moral lives? And this has, just like a lot of the positive psychological approaches, has been ignored with a ratio of 21:1. So let me share with you just a couple of studies in this area, both of them done by our very own Ellen Langer. This, by the way, the study that I'm going to share now is going to be the backbone of a movie coming out about Professor Langer. Person who's going to play Ellen Langer, she's the first female tenured professor in the psychology department. The person who's going to play Langer is Jennifer Aniston. And the movie is coming out hopefully in a year. But it's about this experiment that I'm going to share with you now. So this was done in 1979. Here is what Langer did. What she did was take men who were above 75 years old and send them to a retreat, which was a 1959 retreat. Meaning, even though this was 1979, the music was from 1959. The magazines that they read that they were all around were 1959. The daily newspapers were 1959. Everything was 1959. Even they had to go into the role, just like in Zimbardo, they had to play the role of 1959, as if they were 20 years younger. Now, of course, it was a psychological experiment. They had all these different measures taken before, after. And And here is what they found. 1 week retreat. At the end of the week, both mental and biological age decreased. For example, they became more flexible in tests. They became stronger. Their grasp, their legs, their body became stronger. Their memory improved significantly. So their intelligence level, as taken by tests before and after compared to a control group, improved significantly after a single week. She measured the distance between the bones in the fingers, because when we get older, the space becomes smaller, they become tighter. The length after a week increased in their fingers. They became happier. They became more self-sufficient, less dependent on other people, as rated by themselves and as rated by their family members. They became healthier. Their eyesight and hearing improved significantly in as little as a week, just because they entered a powerful, positive situation, which goes against a lot of the stereotypes and the prejudices that they encounter in the outside world. So just by quote-unquote acting a certain role, they became that role, just like Zimbardo's prisoners became their role in as little as a week. Another study that she did, and this is reported in her book Mindfulness, which I highly recommend. She took in and tested people's eyesight, and she gave them a normal eyesight chart, measured them, wrote down their performance. And then she took the exact same people, this time put them in pilot's overalls, and at the same time put them in a flight simulator and showed them the exact same eye chart. Same distance, same eye chart. The only difference being they're sitting in a flight simulator and they're wearing pilot's overalls. They were sitting there looking at the eye chart, and again she ran the eye test. 40% of participants' eyesight improved significantly as a result of just changing the situation. Same distance, same chart, same everything. Different situation. The question is, how do we create a positive situation? How can we create a situation that improves us with the role? And I want to share with you a couple of studies. I'll share one study and then another later about the environment. First of all, the work of Baj. Priming is when we have subconscious or conscious priming. For example, you're looking at a screen and for just a few milliseconds a word appears, and that word primes you. And there's a lot of research on how it can prime you negatively with stereotypes, for example, with prejudices, or positively, but not enough on positively. So here is a study done by Barge, where he primed people with words associated with old. So for example, words such as old, words such as stick, word such as, like a old person stick, words such as Florida. Really, that's one of the words he primed people with. So he primed people with quote-unquote old words. And then he had them take, compared to a control group, an intelligence test and a memory test. The memory of the people who were primed with quote-unquote old words, they performed worse than the control group. Second, he looked at these people and measured how fast they walked from where the experiment was to the elevator, and also had blind evaluators, people who didn't know which condition they were in, evaluate how they were walking. So the people who were primed with old actually walked more stooped than the other people, and they walked significantly slower toward the elevator, not knowing that they were primed with old words. They walked slower toward the elevator than the people who were not primed with these old words. Subconscious completely. And then he did the same thing, priming people with words related to achievement. The people who were primed subconsciously with words related to achievement did better on tests than control group. Their memory improved, and they persisted more on difficult tasks. And the question is, and the thing that I'll talk about next time, is how can we create consciously and subconsciously a positive environment where we actually can take out the most moral, most successful self, to appreciate that self, to help the environment bring out the best in us. Next time. Hope you had a wonderful long weekend. So, let's jump right into it. So where did we leave last time? Last time we talked about the power of the situation. We talked about how beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies, and how it is through the situation that we very often create expectations, beliefs of people, and these beliefs become reality. And we talked about how social psychology essentially started with some very important experiments, such as the Milgram effect, or obedience to authority, such as Zimbardo's prison experiment, where prisoners were put in, or students played the role of prisoners or the role of wardens, and they actually entered that role so totally that after a week the experiment had to be stopped when it was supposed to go on for 2 weeks. And then the question we asked was, okay, so we know that the situation is powerful, we know that it makes a difference. Can we also create a powerful, positive situation to bring out the best in people? And the answer is yes. And we started talking about it, and we talked about Professor Langer and her research, and how she showed that putting elderly men in an environment where they were actually, or where they acted as if they were 20 years younger, actually became younger, to the point of having higher levels of intelligence, to the point of improving their memory, improving their eyesight, improving their hearing. The distance between the bones in their fingers actually became longer, which is a sign of younger age. They were rated by others as well as by themselves as stronger and younger, just because they acted as if it was 1959 instead of what it really was, which was 1979. The power of the positive situation. And then she did more research on people going for an eyesight test and then putting them in a situation in a flight simulator, and the exact same eyesight test, they actually performed better just because of the situation. And we moved on, and that's where we ended last time, by talking about priming. Priming can be done on the conscious or subconscious level. It means planting a seed, planting a belief, planting a word or a picture in our mind, consciously or subconsciously, and how that actually influences our behavior. So Barge, that time of NYU, did the research where he primed people with words associated with old, words, if you remember, such as wrinkles, words such as old, words such as Florida. And as a result of this priming, those participants in the study actually walked slower, were actually more stooped when evaluated by researchers who were not aware of their condition, meaning they didn't know whether they were primed with control words, just random words, or with words associated with old. So it was just through the priming that people actually started to behave differently. The power of the situation, the power of the environment. And then Barge took it a step further and said, okay, let's prime them with positive primes, such as achievement, such as persistence, such as success, these words. For example, they had to find a synonym for the word achievement. Those who were primed with these words on intelligence tests and on memory tests actually performed better than the control group who wasn't primed with these words. Two Dutch researchers, Dijkhuis and Knippenberg. What they found was that they brought people in and they asked them to describe, for a future experiment, not for that experiment, for a future experiment, asked them to describe the typical day or typical characteristics of three archetypes. A soccer hooligan, a secretary, and a professor. Describe these three archetypes. And they told them that this is for the next experiment where we just want people to evaluate these archetypes, not knowing that actually by describing these archetypes, these individuals were primed. They were primed for a soccer hooligan, for a secretary, or for a professor. And then they had to do intelligence tests afterwards, memory tests after those primes. Those who had to describe the day of a soccer hooligan performed the worst in terms of memory, in terms of intelligence. Then there was the secretary, and those who performed the best were those who described the professor. Now, they didn't study any harder before. Nothing changed except for the fact that there was a prime, there was something planted from the environment in their minds. The question then is, how can we create a positive environment for ourselves where we're primed by the positive, where we can be happier, more successful, and so on? And there are many ways in which we can do it. Let me share a few. And in fact, this is going to be your assignment for this week, or one of the assignments, to create a positive environment. So here are some of the examples. Have pictures of people you love or places you love. The important thing about these things is that even if you don't see them, you see them. So on the subconscious level, it's still there. Even though on the subconscious level, when people are primed, they don't really see the word, say, achievement on the screen when it's there for 25 milliseconds. They don't really see it, but it registers. So even if a picture is there and you don't, quote-unquote, really see it or are not really conscious of it, mindful of it, it still has an impact on you. So have pictures of people you love. Have pleasant objects, whether it's memorabilia, whether it's flowers, whether it's art, your favorite art. So I have in my house and my office my favorite art on the wall by my favorite artists. And let me share with you a few. I actually brought them here. These are very valuable. I insured them, so it's not a problem. So this is this specific artist from the first phase of his career. As you can see, very powerful strokes, very intense, very deliberate, and just gorgeous. And here is by the same artist from the second phase of his career. Here you already begin to see impressionist influence on his work. But still, you see the same trend, the same power, the same intensity. So I have these on my wall. There's a new and upcoming artist whom I want to introduce you to. She still doesn't have a second phase. She's only 1 year old. But this is work done with the help of her mom. But again, these are on my wall and they remind me every day. And even if I've seen them hundreds of times, it's still there. And I think about my kids. And then I also have other, lesser known artists work on my wall. Again, this is, probably have not heard of this one. This is Rodin, the thinker. And so I have this on my wall. It's my favorite sculpture. And then I have another piece by Rodin, just to remind me that it's not all about thinking, that there are other things that make life worth living. So this is Rodin's The Kiss, for those of you who know it. And again, have these things on your wall, create an environment where you feel warm, where it's fun for you. to be there. Quotes. You know I love quotes. And I know that many of you love quotes. Some of you have sent me your favorite quotes. I have on my wall a list of quotes, and they're there, and even if I don't see them, I see them. So, for example, let's see if I brought some here. Yeah, here they are. So one is by John Quincy Adams. Patience and perseverance have a magical effect before which difficulties disappear and obstacles vanish. So priming the issue of persistence, by the way, which is one thing that Barge did. He primed that and people actually became more persistent. George Eliot, or also known as Marianne Evans, my favorite author, she wrote, "The important work of moving the world forward does not wait to be done by perfect men." I'll talk about perfectionism, which is a very important, very personal theme for me in about 3 weeks. So she's very much a role model. Camus, "In the depths of winter, I finally learned that there was within me an invincible summer." A quote that has helped me through hard times. Henry David Thoreau, "If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Again, I have these quotes up on my wall, a few others, and many of the quotes that you see in the course, and they prime me, they remind me, they create the environment for me. We'll talk about art in the next section, its importance. Have your favorite books next to you. Listen to music, but listen to it mindfully. Not just as background music, but music that inspires you, whether it's Rocky, whether it's Eminem, whoever it is. Watch films that inspire you. All these things help you to create an environment that is conducive to growth, to success, to well-being. A lot of it is done on the subconscious level, which is the power of the priming studies. And finally, this is what positive research is about. If we constantly focus on quote-unquote negative research, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, we're primed by this research, we're primed by this work, and it creates reality. This indirectly and tangentially relates to, some of you may know, the Eisenberg principle, is that when you measure a phenomenon, you're changing the phenomenon. When you measure a phenomenon, you're also changing yourself. So by researching the positive, we're also priming ourselves with the positive.